Mellow greetings to all of you phenomenal folk out there, and welcome to another stirring installment of this, the Disinformed podcast. And if you would like to join along as we exclaim, by the eternal, behold, it's the Disinformed podcast. We have something a little different winging your way this week. We got embroiled in a pretty lengthy discussion at the end of our most recent recording, and that spilled over into what amounted to almost another full hour of discussion on just an array of sordid stories and strange topics, which Dr. Michael and myself tended to wax poetic about, including some of our musical tastes, our favorite sports teams, and an array of bizarre ephemera. And so you can dive into that for this week's episode, and why we are going to have a little fast and loose intro this morning as opposed to our usual witty banter and urbane nonsense. But I believe that is going to just give us a swift segue into the episode, and I will let the magic of Michael's marvelous editing whisk us away. And so, with no further delay, here's the episode. I thought we were going to go into talking about like pivoting on sports teams, though, because we thankfully, when I moved up here, I now have a new hometown team. And right as the Phoenix Suns started to tank and return to their normal losing ways,
as they always do.
I was like, the Portland Trailblazers are actually playing really well this year. So my key for my home is emblazoned with the Portland Trailblazers logo.
Nice.
I will very likely have the logo on my license plate as well. So I am a very quick
you are
convert.
all in.
Now, I am still a Boston Celtics fan, so I mean, thankfully, I always have my permanent team, but now I will flit with the hometown crowd.
Yeah, and honestly, like, as someone that has never lived in Phoenix, you, like, as soon as you leave Phoenix, you immediately ditch their teams.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're always, except for the Mercury. The Mercury are the only team I feel like that is genuinely good.
Well, the Diamondbacks and the
consistently,
Mercury are the only teams that have won championships in the state. Well, unless you're counting the Rattlers, but we're not talking about
indoor football.
It's the same as roller hockey, which I did enjoy
True.
in my younger days as well. Just tangentialize.
Indoor football game I've ever been to was with the LFL league, which was the Lingerie Football League.
I see.
Yeah, so
hot.
Yeah, well, so
my
funny
favorite
enough,
tight ends in that sport. But.
So what's so funny
how?
about it is it went to it, thinking it was just the gimmick and just a bunch of ladies in lingerie, and it would be a bit of a pillow fight, like, oh no, stop, but
He wasn't wrong.
well, the women were definitely beautiful and they were definitely in lingerie, but also they fucking brought it. Like, they were badass. Like, the game was amazing.
Yeah.
They were so competitive, and like some of the women, like, while gorgeous, were also like, God, if they tackled me like that, I would be broken in half. Like,
and holding is my favorite penalty in the Lingerie Football League.
Yes. Well, so before we cycle too much on the sports thing, I do want to go back to the initial conversation that we had opened with and then quickly left behind. Reformatting.
Well, I don't remember
the show.
asking you a goddamn thing.
Well, I was asking you. I was asking you the goddamn question, and if memory serves correct, you said my voice was valid. My question was...
I have been known to make mistakes from time to time. If this podcast isn't evidence enough of that, I don't know what would
deep.
be.
Holy shit.
Shane, I think you
Validating
need to
voices.
talk to somebody for some mental health there.
Yeah, I do need to actually seek some therapy, and talking to the both of you has definitely reaffirmed that for me. So,
Well, no, the conversations that you and Michael had offline, I was just curious if you wanted to flush out some of those details, because inquiring minds do want to know what you guys are thinking about in terms of coming up with the reformatting.
Well, I think we have had a lot of discussion about whether or not we've been enamored with the format of the show, particularly given the fact that we have had co-hosts dropping like flies over the course of the past few months here. And what precipitated that was not necessarily the format of the show itself, but it does get a little rigorous having to, and Michael, I think, can speak to this more than I, because he has certainly contributed more episodes and has done all the editing and the videos, but you want to be able to speak, one, from an informed place and an enthusiastic place about subject matter that means something to you. And
Yeah.
we have somewhat beaten our way off of that path, pardon the pun. And so once we got to points where I was going, like, we're obviously just pulling up random Wikipedias and kind of diving into stuff that is not necessarily in our wheelhouse, we might not necessarily be engendering the best momentum going forward. So I had talked to Michael about just doing, some different sort of segments of the show, which I'd like to think over the course of the time since we've been doing this, that I have tried to interject fun games or do different things, like obviously stuff that I've stolen from other podcasts, because that's where we got our hypotheticals and things like that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So just even having discussions, because I think some of the most fun, and I'm not putting words in Michael's mouth like I always do, but like I really enjoyed having the book discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had joked that we could do like a recurring theme of like the Kingsmen, and not necessarily be the Kingslinger podcast, but just since I'm already going on this journey of reading every Stephen King book published, I have a wealth of material just bopping around in the brain that I'm keen to talk about. And also I've been selling other people on reading said material. We had planned on doing another book club discussion of Salem's Lot, which Michael and I both read, and then Courtney read. And
I have finished it as of a couple days, or actually on my honeymoon, I finished it. So I can talk about that. We can talk about it. It's been a while, but I could talk about it.
But see, and then we can get into, again, how it interconnects with all the Dark Tower stuff and all the things that I'm actually, keen on talking about. And because, again, we're friends here. That was kind of the thing that precipitated this in the first place, is we do enjoy talking to each other, whether or not that translates to the listeners. But Doc, you would be the one that would be able to probably speak to that as to whether or not it is engaging or engrossing on the face of it.
Well, I am here.
But exactly. So Michael's discussion with me previously had just been, I think we're funny from time to time. It's a passing fancy. And I think it was less about the emphasis being the show going forward is, well, let's talk about all these varied topics. And yeah, the topics are a great handshake, but by and large, it was just us trying to be funny and have fun and crack each other up. And so that's kind of what my mindset is presently. And then I will stop talking. It's a difficulty for me, I know, but I'll let Michael throw his 2 cents in here.
Oh, geez, you're putting me on the spot. I thought you were going to
I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. But you have an opinion. It's your baby as much as anybody's. So,
but, no, he makes a lot of good points. Like, you have to revisit your source material often in order to evolve as a podcast, in order to just not be stale. And I feel like that was something that we were encountering very often, especially in the last couple of months, where we were just stale, or that we were just trying to force it, without any lube. And so it wasn't enjoyable for a lot of us. And I think that was something that we were really, Shane and I were both thinking of, in that we didn't really want to, like, I love talking about a lot of things, and I love educating people, but like, if it's something that I don't feel 100% like either confident or I really enjoy talking about, like Christmas, then it becomes a lot more difficult, and it becomes a lot more like, let me turn it into a lecture.
Right.
And that was something that like, and Shane really helped at the get-go to avoid us turning into a lecture, because one of the very like early iterations that will never be heard by anyone was that this podcast was incredibly scientific and incredibly intellectual, and because of that, incredibly dry.
Right.
And we don't want to be dry here. I'm now the only person that lives in the desert, but even so, I don't want to be dry.
Right.
Everyone should be, freshly lubricated, freshly wet, all that other fun stuff. So we don't want to do that. And that was like one of the main things why I was really happy that former podcaster John recommended that you join us, Shane, was that like you wanted to keep things entertaining, because that's the idea of a podcast,
right.
Like you want to learn something. There's a million other resources that you can do, but if you want entertainment, then that's what you like. If you're driving in a car for, 4, 5, 8 hours, like you want to listen to something that'll keep you entertained, keep you engaged. Yeah, if you learn something from it, cool, sure, but that's not the main part. It's all about being entertaining. So that's something that we're revisiting now, because like it's something that like even through all the other seasons, we haven't like asked ourselves, is this still entertaining, not just to us, but to our diehard listeners that have been listening for dozens upon dozens of episodes.
No, that makes,
and I feel like
that makes a lot of sense, because you could certainly tell there were times where it did feel like it was just going through the motions, like you guys were just let's make it to the hour mark or whatever, and
making content for the sake of content.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could tell that. And I can see your point about wanting to make sure that it stays interesting, because it really does depend, like both on, like you were saying, Shane, in terms of you want to be a subject matter expert on what you're talking about, but you also do want to like have some sort of enthusiasm and engagement. And to a certain degree, you also want to have something that it's not so esoteric that you're a silo on your own in terms of the enthusiasm. So like, for instance, the Christmas, stuff that, we did, I didn't know a whole lot on, so and I wasn't super enthusiastic on Christmas myself. And so
I don't know that any of us were.
Yeah. So
exactly.
So like,
no one really cares, except unless you are a Christian theologian. No one cares about listening to the controversies of early Christian doctrine and how it relates to Christmas.
Yeah. So I could see why that could be like, okay, maybe this is, especially if it's not something super up your wheelhouse, like, where you're just making content, seasonal content because it's that time. But then, before that, when we did the Alexander bit, that was super interesting. And maybe that was just me because I also like history, but I found that to be like a super engaging conversation. And I thought like
they were. Yeah. And I think to course correct kind of some of the sentiment we were sharing earlier, I enjoy the show and I enjoy the trappings of the show when the content is something that obviously we're interested and engaged with. I think my mind was melting for a good long while there, as evidenced by the fact that if I wasn't on the show, which had been something that heretofore had never happened, obviously I felt compelled to not be on the show, which, we made it 170 something episodes with that not being the case. So it's just, we reach an impasse where we're jumping the shark, right? Yeah. And I think I discovered from like just doing something for the sake of doing it, like I did Baby New Year. That was not a great episode. It also wasn't well received. And you start looking at things like, okay, if this is, and I think Michael had joked that when I was going to miss an episode, he was like going to do the history of marriage with his wife. And I think that was the point that kind of crystallized the notion to me that maybe we shouldn't overstay our welcome with that format if it's just, let's just do it because it's there. I was like, yeah, because your origin story with us, I think, is probably the most emblematic of what I'm trying to indicate here without waxing too philosophical, but we throw in just randomly a pun about, glowing bees and cherry popping daddies because it's a grenadine factory. You stumble on this because you like the band, didn't realize it was just a silly reference and listened. But the show was actually engrossing and entertaining, and that's largely credited to Courtney and also the fact that, again, we're nuts. So if we do that and, you do get one bite at the apple with somebody for a first pass, if they're like, oh, hey, I'm really interested in LaVeyan Satanism or, the Satanic Panic or any of this stuff, and they're there. If it then turns into, yes, we're talking about it, but it's this bland recitation of let's read 18 and a half paragraphs of, and then in 1954, Alexander LaVey went and did it. It's like no one's going to want to come back for that. So you get like a quick, cheap pop there. You steal a pay-per-view from somebody to go with wrestling, and then you lost them. Mm-hmm. So I would rather have somebody come back and like, oh, if we're doing where we're not on the format going forward and we don't necessarily have an entire giant episode, if the lie turns into we have one or two things that are relevant, in the moment, or we're lying about something that we were talking about of, like, oh, there's a new Prince album coming out, in case you didn't know, and just random nonsense that is a lie, and we don't necessarily have to explain that. Like, there's ways that we can keep the format true to the show, but not have it be the entire shtick. I'd rather it be that than let's start doing, okay, well, let's talk about the history of Britannia, tracing back, let's go back to,
Celtic worship.
Let's discuss Beowulf and its genesis in folkloric, and like, yeah, that's great, and I find it interesting, but we're probably going to bore the hell out of most everybody who's listening. And, I liked Alexander, but at points we got very granular, and I will confess that my eyes were rolling around in my head like they were rattles.
I will so disagree. I went back and I listened to both of those, and I think for anybody that's a history person or remotely interested in history, I think that was like super good. I think
met a lot of those, have you?
And that's why we had, maybe one or two more people with those episodes. And then they promptly left for all the other episodes.
Fair point.
So, yeah, this is what I'm meaning, is that, yes, we will be able to get people with those things, but for the comment, like the joke about musicians, like, I am one of those people who's very fixated on, I can tell you who was in the band, I can tell you what the title of the song was, who played on it, was the backing track. Like, those are things that interest me, but if I talk about it, I'm not necessarily going to translate that to everybody. So yeah, we'll get folks who are interested in a Slipknot album who will come in and listen to a show, or we'll be able to entreat somebody about, customs of the Asian society, depending upon circumstances or things, and it's great, but it's ultimately going to be the discourse and the personalities of the people here that will keep folks actually interested, and not just for one episode.
If you're potentially shifting away from a recurring, anyways, like regular, like somebody presents a story or topic, and sprinkles in lies to that, then what is the rest? Like, what's the kind of the meat of the podcast? If it's not always that, like, if that's not your format, and it's not just going to be like, a couple guys like sitting around just chatting, what's the kind of the recurring motif that you would be bouncing around with this, or at least shifting between?
I'm not letting you take over as the host, Michael, if that's what you're trying to
that is
intimate.
Not what I would...
So we'll just clear that out of the agenda.
Where did that come from?
No, I'm joking.
Man, is that what I sounded like? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that at all. Oh boy, howdy.
I'm not trying to insinuate myself here at all, but no, I think it can just be questions. I think it can just be folks sitting around shooting the shit at this point. I feel like we have enough of a wealth of material as a backlog to be like, if this is really what you're here for, go check this out in the archives, or we can discuss things that are tangential to that. I mean, obviously we have two Pastafarian ministers on here. We can have random incursions into things that are just interesting to us. I can talk about, obviously the things I'm passionate about. You can all talk about the things you're passionate about. And those topics, I feel like we have a tendency to start building momentum once we talk about anything, and it germinates with, I think one of the things I loved about doing Loose Fits, even though we called it, consequences of having a lazy co-host here, was we had a lot of really fun conversations. Were they the most popular episodes we had? No, but I think, again, we weren't getting that quick hit of somebody seeing, oh, this is something I'm familiar with. But if we're going to do the show in perpetuity, I would rather do it because I like talking to my friends, as opposed to, fuck, here we go, I gotta go.
Here's the lecture.
So,
this is right. Like,
if you're okay, so with that in mind, then if it becomes a conversation amongst friends, if you're easing up on the the diligence needed for like research purposes and the the time intensiveness that goes in with the historical podcast that you guys were doing. So what about Courtney? Would you think she'd be stepping back in?
I think it's a matter of like Courtney
scheduling.
Yeah, scheduling, and I think Courtney has her own shit. Once she started figuring out that she wanted to do like it's the Kevin
own
Smith
podcast
like
and
Clerks thing of like, oh, well, if these chuckle fucks can throw a show together, then obviously I can host my own. So yeah, I don't think that was Courtney, necessarily doing it because she dislikes us. I think it was Courtney just going, if I'm going to do it, I'd rather put the emphasis on the things I like with my husband as opposed to these guys' agenda. And, and I'm desperately kind of the reason I sent the communique this afternoon is I don't want to do that. I don't want this to turn into, well, obviously this is Michael's thing and fuck it, I'm not doing it. I think it's as much our show as it is anybody's. And John was a real vital part of that for a long time.
Yes, agreed.
I think, circumstances kind of moved us all in different directions. And we talked about this. John had kind of gotten really disinterested in the whole process for a while. And it wasn't his baby necessarily. And so it's harder to be invested in those things when it's not, your diligent, dedicated
Creation.
effort. Right.
Do you envision with the reformatting of it? Do you envision like a rotating cast, like any new entries? Like, do you have the bad artist, Jesse coming on, or your wife joining Michael, or do you just envision it the two of you, or potentially the three of us, whatever?
If they want to, I know bad artist Jessie has already said that she wants to, and I have no problem with her being back on, and you can quote me on it. I actually thought about reaching out to her like within the last day or so, saying, oh, yeah, we can have you on. And like, when someone comes in and talks about something that they're really passionate about, I have no problem with that. Like, I think the main thing that we want to avoid is we don't want to force it so often that we have to talk about things that we don't like.
Right.
Like, if there's something that you feel like you're like, I would really love, like, for your case in point, like cherry popping daddies. You really want to talk about that. Yeah, let's do that with the format that we already have set, because it will lead to interesting conversation.
Yeah, and that happens organically.
Right.
Exactly. And the idea with us going forward is that it doesn't need to be. If we want to just sit here and like what we're doing now and just shooting the shit, that's fine. Because like we want people to be here for us and the conversations that erupt from us. I don't know why I use that word erupt.
It works.
Perfect case in point. But as opposed to they don't want to listen because, oh yeah, there's the satanic panic, or they want to learn about Pastafarianism or any of those things. They show up because they're interested in the things that we want to talk about.
Goodfellas movie buffs.
I mean, it's no less arbitrary to do that than, to have a discussion about QAnon or Pizzagate. Like, I think talking about the Scorsese oeuvre is as interesting to anybody.
Oh, no, that wasn't sarcasm. That was legitimate. I was
Yeah.
Obviously, that's something I feel like if we talk about movies, it doesn't take much provocation to get me going. And I think Fan Fusion really is what solidified this for me, even before Disinformed got involved. When I was presenting stuff at Fan Fusion just of my own accord, is like, fandom is something that a lot of people, one, coalesce around, but two, like, that is how you find like kind, like you find your tribe. Like, you wouldn't be talking to us right now if this hadn't happened. And we have similar sense of humor, similar interests, and like, I'd like to talk about actual musical interests and things that way. That's gonna happen organically, as opposed to us saying, okay, next week I have to have a topic, and then next week I have to have a topic. It's just, hey, if you got discussion about the Cherry Poppin' Daddies you want to throw in, great, let's do it. If Michael has something he really feels like talking about, and we lie occasionally, we don't even have to be as intentioned as saying, here are 6 lies and we're going to have it this evening. It's just we can get through the whole discussion and turn to, oh, by the way, when I said that it was founded by Joseph of Arimathea, that's not actually the case. That is, that's
Actually,
Christ's, baby daddy, and not a member of the Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Well, speaking of music, there was something I had been meaning to ask you, Shane, and I kept forgetting. I know that you and I both
You're a real
Metallica
piece of
fans.
shit.
What?
Damn. Holy shit.
No. Are you looking for the reaction to Lux Eterna?
Yeah, I was just curious what your thoughts were.
Oh, it's delightful.
So good.
So I'm one of those, and I think we've mentioned on the show, I'm not like a Metallica apologist by any shape or means, but I really, particularly over the last few years, have kind of fallen back in love with Metallica, and I feel like their last 3 or 4 records have really been exemplary. Like Hardwired, I was absolutely over the moon for. It's something I listened to a ridiculous quantity.
Is so good.
Oh, yeah. And so I've just sort of rekindled this adoration. So once I saw that single drop, I was like, oh fuck yeah, I'm so ready for this. And I've been watching, like, I loved I think what got me into Metallica was watching Some Kind of Monster. Like, I love watching behind the scenes as someone who's been in a band and requires therapy, apparently. I can relate to individuals going through that sort of situation and those stressors and watching people not want to be in the same room with one another. And we've had plenty of the fuck kind of moments with my, current or former band, whatever you want to say. So when I start getting into things like that, we can get granular. But no, long story short, too fucking late. The new single is fucking amazing. I feel like it's got that sort of like vitality and energy of like the punk rock speed metal Metallica days, like, which was kind of death magnetic. Yeah,
it is so very, very reminiscent of like
Motorhead kind of.
I was gonna say it's Motorhead's like Overkill meets Metallica's Hit the Lights.
Yes,
it is very
which is
much
a great
in
fucking
that vein.
song. Yeah,
oh, exactly. I would say like it's a perfect marriage of those two. If you were to first of all, James's vocals sound so good, but
I don't know how he's getting better with age, but
well,
he's
and the
managing
funny thing
it.
about that is that so when I first heard it, like I thought, okay, this sounds phenomenal and it sounds so good, but I also thought, there's a lot of studio magic must be happening here, right? Because, his voice is just so good. And I had known that his voice had taken a bit of a hit, years back and stuff.
Right.
And some of it hadn't been so good. When I saw them live in like 2012, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't this.
Oh,
right?
well, he has, actually taken vocal lessons. Like,
well, that's what I was going to get to. Is that I've
better.
seen so that inspired me because I heard and I thought, okay, this sounds so good, but like I said, it must be a lot of studio magic here. So I was like, let me go and like look at some of these live, performances that they've been doing, and no, like they are like he is that good live.
The only difference is that they're playing it a half step down live, so he can hit the notes a little easier. But it's within his wheelhouse. Like the No Leaf Clover version from SNM2, like he's hitting the notes that used to be falsetto for him. He's hitting them in chest voice now. So he's actually just pushing enough to get on top of it, which is, yeah, we're getting way too fucking wonky for musicians out here. But yeah, I've been sitting here noticing that where it's like when it comes to B section at the end where he used to pop up into falsetto, he's now just pushing it in chest voice. I was like, okay. Wow. So he's just figured out how to sing and get the musculature, and your voice evens out. You have really weird phases. When I was doing voice training when I was in college, they did mention is like you're going to hit a peak where your lowest note is going to be your lowest note. But then when things start to kind of settle out, you're going to get a better register, both higher and lower. And then eventually that's going to start to deteriorate as you get older, because when, you're an old man, you start losing a lot of that, which is why Bob Dylan sounds like fucking Tom Waits now. But it's really interesting to hear his maturation from a vocal perspective.
And the entire band is just really firing on all cylinders. I mean, obviously they've been around for so long, but like what's fascinating too is seeing them kind of reach into their grab bag. Like I've seen some of the performances that they've done from earlier this year where they've dusted off some Saint Anger songs, and like if it sounded like that, if that was the recorded version on the original album, Saint Anger would have been a huge hit. Like it sounds so good. Like Frantic, when they did it in like July 2022, the performance I watched of it, I was like, oh, no, this is a great song. And then I was like, wait, is this the actual Saint Anger song that I remember like thinking, oh God, what am I listening to?
That fucking record's a great record. I don't want to hear anybody else say it. Yeah, the snare sounds like shit, but no, the songwriting was good. Saint Anger
is a good album. It is a bad Metallica album.
See, I'm still gonna again, my like high water marks for me. I liked Load and Reload, which they routinely say like are the worst things that they've ever contributed to tape. So like,
no, but
it's relative.
Yeah, but I mean, there is nothing approaching Fixer, Outlaw Torn, Bleeding Me, nothing approaching that from that. I would say like even All Within My Hands gets close, but then at the end of it, when he just goes on this like onslaught of kill, it tanks the song. I'm like, why did you end this? Like you had a good song, All Within My Hands and Unnamed Feeling.
Dirty Window, Unnamed Feeling's great.
Yeah, those like there's
Some Kind of Monster is a fucking like absolute
Well, I think a
rocker
lot
of
of the
tune.
songs are really good. They just go on too long. There's not enough like mix in it. Whereas like I think like a lot of the stuff from Load and Reload, there's enough variety within like, you know, tempo changes and just like you know, the mixes within it that the variation keeps it going. Whereas a lot of Saint Anger is just the same thing going on for 6 minutes.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of the stuff that was on prior Metallica records is masturbatory guitar bullshit. And like Orion's great, but Jesus Christ, it's the same fucking arpeggiated stuff for 3.5 minutes before you even start the solo. Like, okay, I get it. But so it's all really just a matter of taste, right?
Oh, no,
and that's the thing that's great about music is, but I mean, obviously it's arbitrary because somebody sitting here is going to be like, oh yeah, if it's not on the fucking Black Album, it's bullshit. And I was like, yeah, the Black Album is probably the most radio friendly unit shifter of all the Metallica material. But, you know, for all the And Justice fans, I was like, yeah, there's 3 songs on that record I can listen to. The rest of it, I'm kind of like, it's a really long fucking song, man.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the Black Album in a conversation about Saint Anger because the Black Album is my least favorite Metallica album. And just before that is Saint Anger.
Okay.
So
what's your favorite Metallica album?
Load. It houses Bleeding Me and The Outlaw Torn, which to me are two of
Outlaw
the most
Torn's
beautiful.
amazing.
The 2 songs.
I
Bleeding
love
Me and
that
Outlaw
you're
Torn
not saying "Ain't My Bitch" is not like your immediate apex song. I'm really just kind of.
Well, 2x4 is really where it's at.
2x4 is actually a fucking great song.
Yeah, it's such a bluesy riff. I actually really like
the
it.
Cure.
Yeah.
Like yeah. There's such great stuff.
Choking on a bad seed and stuff. Yeah.
Even Hero of the Day is actually like as a single was a great track. So
yeah, no, I Load is my favorite. I also really like, you know, Reload. Honestly, that whole little era there, like when we went from Load to Reload to the I Disappear was just like bang, bang, bang. And then we have
I Disappear was great.
Yeah. And then, you know, obviously the S&M with No Leaf Clover and Minus Human, those 2 like new tracks.
Great tracks.
Just like, oh, so good, so good. And that's why I think for me, Saint Anger was a bit of like a screeching halt where the car didn't stop for another 15 feet, and I was wondering if we were going to hit that intersection in 20 feet in there.
The fun thing, it's like you know, Rumors was to Fleetwood Mac. It's just that it was a bunch of people under duress. Whereas, you know, like James was going in and out of rehab at that point. So like that the album even coalesced into something that got released is kind of a wonder in and of itself. So maybe my attachment to it is more the process of that album being made and being able to be a fly on the wall watching it than it is me going like, oh, it's really great material.
Yeah, do you think you would like do you think you would like Saint Anger less had some kind of monster not been released and you gotten to see all
probably
that? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still like the first like 3 or 4 tracks on it. I'm always going like, this is frenetic. It's angry. Like it's aggressive. It's everything I like. I'm not a fucking drum tech, so I'm not sitting there going like, "Oh, that
why are these
snare!"
Trash cans? Yeah, why are these trash cans?
Like that snare. Oh yeah.
So it's really just it's all purely for me. It's like a matter of taste. When anybody starts talking about songwriting and the merits of songwriting versus something else, I'm like, fucking Wham has outsold probably 80% of the people that folks would call classically trained. Like Yngwie Malmsteen's great, but I'm not gonna fucking listen to him. Like I don't care. Technical Ecstasy is not what I'm here for. Like my brother loves Dream Theater. It's one of his absolute favorites. I cannot listen to them because like they are like the fucking Chuck E. Cheese band for me. There's just no anima. They're really proficient technically, but the songs have no energy. There's no actual like it doesn't do anything for me. Whereas like the anima is not there. But I can fucking watch Tool and I'm completely engrossed. And Tool is as masturbatory as a band musically as anybody on the planet, particularly like the last album. So it's funny the things that speak to you or don't. And again, it's all sum total of experiences. That's why David Fincher is my favorite director versus, somebody else, is that it speaks to me in a particular way. but where I can read a Chuck Palahniuk novel and go like, oh, I really loved this when I was in my 20s, and I read it now and it's kind of cringy, and I look at the formulations of my personality and some of the things that contributed, and even some of the Stephen King I love. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why do I love this?
But isn't that interesting how some stuff you look back
Ooh.
and you're like, oh, and with a shudder, but then some stuff just follows you through. Like, when did you first get into Metallica?
Probably right around the time that Reload was released, because
So like 97-ish?
Basically 97, 98. I was probably maybe even 99. I think I was probably like a junior in high school when I first started listening to Metallica, and then I caught up. And even then, like all the stuff prior to those albums, I didn't rush to listen to.
Well, but so think about that. Going back to junior high, here we are almost 25 years later. New Metallica song comes out and it's still just like, oh, so good. And that's the same way it is with me. It's like 25 years in and I'm like, this is phenomenal, which is so funny in terms of like some stuff sticks with you, like Metallica's new album here coming out. And I'm so excited. The song is so good. And then I think back to like 13-year-old Mike as well. What was he jamming to outside of Metallica? Oh, he was nodding his head to like, Nookie by Limp Bizkit, right? And he was loving that.
Unfortunate soul.
Well, exactly.
God.
And then here we are in 2022. Limp Bizkit also has come out with a new like tune. And like I gave it a listen for nostalgia's sake and was like, never again.
Yeah.
So it's just funny the way things change, whereas like 13-year-old Mike thought Limp Bizkit was just as good as Metallica. And now 36-year-old Mike is like, Metallica, yes, so excited. Let's give me more. And Limp Bizkit, no, thank you.
Some things are just kind of the detachable rocket of your maturation process. And it's how taste develops. So it's like the things that help propel you forward into the atmosphere, and then you don't need them any longer. And a lot of that.
I love that.
That was well
like
said.
the rage quotient in particular, a lot of things that happen when you're a testosterone filled ball of hormones, like that stuff, you manage to ejaculate it out of your system eventually, hopefully. Now, some people, Republicans, don't always get there, but no, I'm sorry.
Oof.
Yes, we do respect all of our friendly conservative countrymen here, but
respect.
yeah, absolutely.
Welcome.
We tolerate,
welcome,
Yes.
respect.
Hey, I respect anybody that owns a firearm. I really do, because the alternative is death. So, but no. So, long story short, too fucking late. Like, it's a lot of those things that I look back on. I was like, okay, it was necessary for the formulation of my reptilian brain, and then once I got shuffled loose of that, I was like, okay, I don't need this anymore. But nostalgia is also a very heady drug, if we've learned nothing. So it just kind of depends on your circumstances.
No, I agree with that. I have to admit, the odd time that like Nookie does come on the radio, I'll still kind of nod my, yeah, that's right. I did it all for the Nookie. Come on. Like,
see, and like while you were listening to Nookie, I was listening to Cold. So, which I mean, I do owe Fred Durst for, because he's the reason they got signed and released. But again, that's very that odd, like introspective, mopey, fucking, sad bastard music, which I still love. Anytime a Cold song pops on, I'm like, it's still a beautiful drug. It hurts just as good as it did when I was younger.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, I was very much the angry, angsty guy that sat in the back of the room and Tim Burton-esque, like.
See, I was angry, but I was more like the break stuff, like Limp Bizkit, Metallica, Marilyn Manson. What did you say?
I said, yeah, an idiot.
No,
I kid. We are nothing if not ball busters here. But no, yeah, I get what you're saying. Is more of that, the energy outward as opposed to, the inward energy.
Godsmack and all that stuff.
Oh, Godsmack's fucking great, though.
Yeah.
It's funny. My brother initially was like a really big goon for Seven Dust. Mm-hmm. And I liked Godsmack because, it's like, it's named after an Alice in Chains fucking song. So obviously that hits me in the feels. And Alice in Chains was my favorite band for years and years and years. And I've finally kind of come to terms with the fact that I don't love them as much as I used to, but they're still really amazing and impactful for me. So, but we did this weird flip where eventually, like, my brother started being a little bit more into Godsmack and I got a lot more into Seven Dust. And, you know, he's since come back around because Seven Dust, I think, is probably my favorite of like the new metal acts. Still like a band that I love to death because the harmonies and the riffage is so fantastic. But I also love like Clint Lowry's sort of spacey atmospheric tones that he gets with their stuff, which I love. It's not just this straight ahead monolithic blistering metal shit, which that's
Rage
the reason I love.
Probably my favorite.
Exactly. And Rage is fantastic for that same reason, because Tom Morello gives you a lot of set dressing before he hits the distortion. And like Opeth is probably my favorite like black metal or death metal band for that same purpose, because there's at least contrast, right? So it's really important for me to have that where it's not just, okay, I get it, it's Manson, we're just gonna hit the same fucking thing 87 times.
More screaming,
which
All
I
right, cool.
I respect the criticism of Metallica specifically for that. Because like The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here for Alice in Chains, I feel like was borderline being the same, where it's like, fuck, how many times are they going to play this riff? Like, they're not changing it at all. It's just the same shit over and over and over. And I stopped being in love with the band because of that. So, yeah, purely a matter of taste, strangely enough.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you are a huge fan of it. I'm super excited to see what they bring with 72 Seasons.
Oh, God, that album's going to be fun.
Do you think there's going to be an instrumental on it?
At this point, like, yeah, I don't anticipate there is, because there just hasn't been one that is like notable to me over the last few albums. And if there is, I probably skip it.
Well, I think they didn't have one on Hardwire, I don't believe, and I
don't think so.
Yeah, I think on Death Magnetic they had Suicide and Redemption, and then they hadn't had one. And I
probably skipped it.
And before that, I don't think they had one since Injustice, because they didn't have one on Load or Reload or Saint Anger or The Black. No. So I think Suicide and Redemption was it, which was really good, but it's like 8 or 9 minutes, and it to our conversation we were just having, it is the same like riff, like gone on and gone on and gone on. So it didn't have that same like layered depth that their previous instrumentals had. So if it had been a 3 or 4 minute run, it would have been good, but it just overstayed its welcome.
Yeah.
So that is where I felt with it. So I think that's probably why, and that was a major criticism, I think, of it, which is why I don't think they brought one out for Hardwired. But I would love, given what I'm seeing that they're doing live and the kind of the jam sessions and stuff that they're doing when they're just kind of like, noodling there on the guitar, I would be very interested to see like a instrumental return, maybe, hearkening back to the old days, since that seems to be what they're doing with a lot of their stuff now.
See, instrumentals, like, I love playing, I hate listening to. Which even like I'm like a jam band, like I loved Dave Matthews, still love Dave Matthews Band to a degree. Like there's a time and a place, like I'm pretty specific to the albums that I liked, but yeah, a lot of the improvised sort of stage stuff where it was just, let's play 10 minutes in a row of just kind of screwing around with the same stuff, I lose interest in just straight instrumentation very quickly.
Oh, interesting.
I'm a vocalist primarily. Like that's what I started doing. So as much as I've learned instruments and love playing instruments, I really think of things more as a vocalist and a lyricist. And so it's really hard for me. Like, yeah,
I like it when they break it in like little bits, like when they, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge instrumental, song, but when there's like, I do enjoy it, like Halo on Fire from the last album there, where they've got like a solid like 4 minute run where it is just like an instrumental run before it goes back to the lyrics and it completely changes. That's great. Same thing with like Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine. There's like that instrumental, bit before he breaks down.
Not too Guns N' Roses.
You don't like Guns? Oh, GNR.
I do not like Guns N' Roses.
Oh, I love GNR. Chinese Democracy. Mwah. It's a true story.
Can I make a guess and say it sometimes can get a little too sappy? Is that your reason? Or
I do not like Axl as a general rule, like vocally. Which again, it's funny. Like my brother and I have talked about this similarly, because he doesn't. It took him a long time to come to terms with liking Coheed and Cambria. He hated Coheed and Cambria for a long time, which that's basically my favorite band at the moment. And he's just like, yeah, don't like his voice. Can't get into it. And like, just sometimes some people just don't resonate with you. And yeah, from the first time I heard Axl Rose, I was just like, yeah, I don't need this in my life. Particularly like anytime, and God, they played Welcome to the Jungle to death.
Oh, that's true. 100%,
when it first came out. So yeah, I was more like a Def Leppard kid at that point, and that was where I was going. So yeah, I was not a Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, I like a lot of those, like I like Def Leppard, I like, Alice Cooper and
Alice Cooper's great, yeah.
But yeah, with GNR, I would say that they've, well, if you count Chinese Democracy, they've got 4 albums, right? But really 2 good albums. Like if you'd have to like Appetite for Destruction is a pretty great album start to finish,
and acclaimed.
And then if you take the other 3, you could collectively make one really good album. If you like, Frankenstein.
Just trim some fat, and just throw things together.
There's a lot of garbage on Use Your Illusions 1 and 2. Just a lot of garbage. There's some like really amazing songs where you're like, oh, this is phenomenal. And then there's just songs where you're like, this is complete trash. Like literally, like I'm not a musician and I could do something better than this. Right. How did they come up with this? So it's humorous there. So I never like, shocked when people say they don't necessarily like Guns N' Roses, with the exception of there are just some phenomenal songs that, or at least I think are phenomenal songs that I'm surprised that they don't at least warm your way into your heart a little bit.
Yeah, like a cold November rain. I'm afraid that I'm chilled to them.
Oh, sweet child of mine.
Indeed.
Oh, and speaking of which, just for you guys,
geez.
What, are you going to try to kill Axl Rose too? Or
well, I got my as a Christmas gift.
Oh, look at you!
Yeah, I got a little like record there.
How delightful!
And it says "Sweet Child of Mine," Guns N' Roses there, and it's me and Cordelia.
Oh, cute!
I can't poo-poo that.
Yeah, it was your child.
A great gift. It's your progeny. Yeah, I agree.
You can fix your chair if you need to.
Yeah, you saw that.
No, just let him sit on the floor. It's fine.
I tried to casually just roll with it.
Yeah,
as it rolled away.
Let's see, we're rolling and tumbling, as the song says. But speaking of being in a tumbler, I think we've probably exhausted, because it's probably like, creeping on 1 a.m. for somebody over here at the very least. Yeah, okay. See, I'm trying to get my times set. It's like, 3 people in different time zones. This is the joy of the Zoom generation, friends.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, never feel... don't ever worry about me on this in here. Having moved to Virginia, I literally know nobody here, right? So I have a couple friends that I hop on and play like tabletop board games there remotely on Saturdays there through Steam. And then outside of that...
it's like, the rest of the time you just spend trying to catfish people into your home so that you can steal their possessions and...
Oh, you're coming here? I got a great place for you to stay.
That's right. I just bought a 6-bedroom house. Shane, come on down. Michael, you too.
I like how we just made you a serial killer.
Wasn't this a reference to an episode? Yeah, I was like, didn't we talk about this for several episodes?
Well, here's the thing. You guys are talking about reformatting the show, and so I thought maybe you want to make it like a true crime show. And then I thought, what better way to do a true crime show than to have the murderer on the podcast?
Okay, so this is Making a Murderer the podcast. Yes.
That's right. I'm just trying to help you guys with your reformatting. So
I appreciate you. I do. I for years people thought I was the one who was going to be the unhinged killer on this show.
You guys will get to be able to break the story when they start pulling the bodies out of my crawl space and digging up the backyard. You'll be like, we had the scoop.
He seemed like such a nice, quiet, reserved individual. I thought that you never, it's so unassuming. I never would have thought that he would be the one who was just wrapping people's entrails around his head and just, squeezing them and playing Hungry, Hungry Hippos.
Yeah, when he was talking about that, I thought it was a whole bit. I thought he was just like, this is what I do in a metaphorical sense, not in a literal sense.
I never would have assumed he actually killed Steve Perry. I just, it was a joke.
Well, what better way? I'll get myself my own little Wikipedia entry, right? And whenever they go through the 90s, that's right. Whenever they go through the 90s and they're talking about the swing revival of the 90s and they talk about the big hit back then, Zoot Suit Riot, there'll always be a little footnote. Steve Perry, 25 years later, murdered by...
And then you got to go on to killing Brian Setzer, any number of the Stray Cats.
The big bad voodoo daddies, they were just in town a couple weeks ago. I missed my opportunity then, but they're apparently coming back next December. So don't worry, gentlemen. They're going to be in the backyard.
Perfect.
And
that's
then
hell yeah,
we can nail the Reverend Horton Heat whenever I make it back over to Phoenix, and we'll take care of it.
That's right. And we've already talked about Metallica, so now they have to go.
killing your heroes.
That's right.
One episode at a time.
As you heard, my favorite song is Bleeding Me, and what I can't wait for is to make them bleed. And then I will be the outlaw.
What you're saying is you have the struggle within.
That's right. They will be all within my hands.
Indeed. And it will be of wolf and man.
I'm going to make them ride the lightning. You can just wait.
And then you'll be trapped under ice. It'll be delightful.
I'm going to
It's electric, in fact.
I'm going to slash Axl
Woogie,
Rose.
woogie, woogie.
God. Yeah, you can use your illusions to think that they're a good band. But, all right. I think we've exhausted poor Michael Clark's tolerance here. He was so enthusiastic about doing an episode today, and then he didn't get a word in edgewise. So
I absolutely enjoyed, and my voice cracked for emphasis. I absolutely enjoyed listening to a bunch of stuff that I didn't know about because you guys were interested in it and you were passionate about it, which is almost like how we want to, I don't know, make the show about.
Yeah.
So this is like a perfect, like, I don't know, I'd say pilot, but we're at episode 177. Yep. So,
well, the lie for the episode was that I actually like Metallica. So
I thought he was going to say the lie was that he didn't like Guns N' Roses. And he's like, actually, and then he shows a tattoo and it's just Axl Rose's face.
It's not even a rose or anything. It's literally just his face.
And it's not even like classic Axl Rose from like the early 90s. It's like mid 2000s when he's got the
bloated.
Cornrows.
Yes. No, in point of fact, I'm going to go get my top hat right now and you will discover that I am in fact Slash. I just, the beard is a put on. And
he ripped his whole beard
so
off.
You mean when I get you to come here to visit the house in Hampton, I can kill two birds with one stone.
You
with one
think.
chain.
Yeah, how about I slash
chain.
you? But no, this is what I envisioned the show would be like. Is just having a grand old time, and I don't give a damn whether or not it's a format that's palatable to anybody. I think 177 episodes of having a formula has justified whatever else we do going forward. That we can say like, yeah, we lie about things occasionally. Just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah. Well, if I continue to stay on with y'all, then
you won't. This is definitely the last time you're on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then it's been.
Yeah. I can't have anybody consort with me who likes Guns N' Roses. I'm sorry, but that weeds out my friend category really quickly.
That's fair. Well, it was good knowing you there, and take care, guys. I'll just exit.
But if you're ever up in Portland, I've got another bedroom here that you can come pop in.
H.H. Holmes, me, sir.
Slow gas leak.
I got plenty of backyard space. It's great.
Well,
it's
I was going to say that if I do return, or if you want the scoop on the breaking, of the murderers once they
when you break bad, yes,
that's right. We will be dusting off the old format here and there because I've got obviously the Cherry Poppin' Daddy scene lined up. I've got a couple ideas for Andrew WK there. Speaking of another musician there,
you can in fact party. Yeah,
that's right. So I've got
and party hard.
I've got ideas for him, and then I kind of like the shifting of the format because something that would be interest is I have and this is a personal history. I've actually met the fellow, known him, literally broken bread with him. One of Canada's worst serial killer, or not serial killers, murderers, who also thought he was a werewolf, 300-year werewolf.
I'm sensing a theme here. But no, I've heard that last pod episode, or it was a mini. So
was it?
Talked about that. Yeah,
I don't know it from any podcast. I'm sure there's lots of them.
But, yes,
but I actually know the guy. So
okay.
Knew the guy. Don't know the guy. We're still best friends.
He pops over to wherever he's like locked up and everything. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going?"
No, he has a 6-bedroom house. He stays whenever he's
he's
out on parole.
Not terribly far from y'all because the stuff actually happened in Alberta, but he's currently at a mountain facility in it's called Mountain Prison. It's a medium.
Oh, he's being mounted. Yes, no question.
It's a medium security facility in British Columbia, so he's not terribly far from you there, Shane.
Oh, I thought you were talking about myself, and I'm like, safe. British Columbia, whoa, that is nowhere near close to Phoenix.
I'm very close to Vancouver, Washington.
Which is actually not that far from Vancouver, Canada.
It is not. I'm within blast
Plot
radius.
twist.
It's the joys of being like a Southwest dweller for much of my life to being here is like we talk about traveling just even within Phoenix proper as like, oh yeah, I'm going to go from this side to this side and it's like a 2-hour drive. Whereas here you're like, I'm in another state if I drive for 2 hours. So like, yeah, it's going to be different to recalibrate my brain, particularly for distances.
I love that you might have heard of Jeremy there then, because that would make
it was an interesting, it was wrapped up in a discussion of a group of other sort of like individuals that all had indicated that they had some form of lycanthropy that was the connective tissue, I believe, was what the episode was based on.
Yeah, it was really a really shocking time when it all kind of happened.
Not surprised.
I guess in retrospect, it shouldn't have been a surprise. But anyways, when I had debated dusting that off, and then, but then I was like, well, it's not really a true crime, podcast type thing. And I don't know if it's fitting because I knew the guy.
I've talked about several killers, so I think we're good.
Exactly.
Several haunted areas. So then I thought, okay, well,
I'll ease in with, the nice topic that I know of. And then I'll find the Andrew WK one is just terribly interesting, the stuff that I was reading about him before. And then I thought, okay, well, then I could reach into the grab bag for the Jeremy Steinke thing as well.
Yeah. Well, we got plenty of opportunity to get into nonsense. And there is still a second half to Florida Man here that was never reconciled. And the lie was in there. So obviously,
that's right.
We do have to finish that up. What's funny is I just started listening to, for my wrestling friends here, I just started listening to the the Kevin Nash
just
podcast.
Now? Oh, it's so good. I've been listening to it for quite some time. Did you hear about his son?
I did, which is tragic.
Yeah, his son was like, you could hear him on old episodes. You'd hear him laughing in the background and stuff like that. It was
because he was a producer,
exactly,
or a researcher, well, also, I'm a huge goon for kayfabe commentaries. Like, I own a bunch of the kayfabe commentary stuff. So the fact that Sean's on there, I'm like, oh, okay, definitely I'll go in, because Nash has always been somebody I'm intrigued by. But you will appreciate, because you probably, irrespective of that show, had not heard it. So when they started launching into Florida Man or Jersey Man, I was like, you sons of bitches. But there's plenty of other people that were all, we came to similar ideas, I'm sure. But yes, they play a game where they do a headline of somebody from Florida or New Jersey, and you have to distinguish which is the two. So I was like, great minds, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really interesting podcast. I like his and I like Flair's, although Flair's is a little bit of a, self-masturbatory there. He just I unfortunately, I used to really enjoy some of the Conrad stuff, because again, I think there's a similar degree of enthusiasm, but fucking hell, the ads are just oppressive. And he just sells himself on, oh, you need help with your debt, and it's just oh my God, get off of
I used to listen to Something to Wrestle religiously, because I thought, one, Pritchard's entertaining, he's a fucking liar, but I mean he's very entertaining, enthusiasm, great impressions, and then the ads are every 2 minutes. These days it's so choked with them, and I get it. It's a racket. You want people to go over and pay the money to be on the the ad free version, so obviously you're just gonna fucking sell as much advertising as possible, and I'm sure that's a very lucrative business. But the difference between that and the Cornette shows, where they're organic, they happen in the show, and there's maybe 4 or 5 sponsors, as opposed to every 2 minutes. You can actually get some
meat of the topic covered before you go to another bloody ad.
Yeah, so I just, those things have managed to whittle themselves down. So really, it is only the only two I've listened to that have any connective tissue is the Nash show and the Cornette stuff, of course, because that's an interesting story. I was going up to see somebody who I met through just playing music, somebody who was a fan. This is what disabused me of the notion of doing this ever again. But I went and hung out with this individual up in Tucson, and it was a weird night, and I left rather than stay. So I was driving back from Tucson to Phoenix, and I was a podcast listener at that point, but just saw that Cornette had a show. And this was, I think he was 6 episodes in. So this was still Court Bauer, the co-host, and they're still figuring out formatting and things. So the drive-through portion was a part of the show. And I listened to 7 episodes back to back, driving back from Tucson to Phoenix, and just was immediately enamored. And I was just I'm definitely going to go for this, because having no idea of, one, he's a great storyteller, like really fun as a raconteur, but perspectives on the business as a historian is really just fascinating. But then like the political stuff as well informs a lot of the shtick I have on this show, I think, unfortunately. But
yeah, I love his stuff. He's got such a great mind, and his retention of the business is phenomenal. Like, he brings up
encyclopedic.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm amazed at the man's ability just to recall things so readily. And like you said, he's really good at like spinning a tale that is engrossing and captivating. I listen to like that, and I listen to Click This regularly. Disco Inferno, he's got a podcast out there.
God, Disco drives me nuts.
I like
Conan. I like Conan though, because I used to listen to like the OG MLW stuff with Court and Mr. Saint Laurent, who's interesting in and of himself as well. But so yeah, I was really dyed in the wool in that for a long time, and I have weaned myself off pretty significantly now.
I still listen to the disco stuff just a little bit because when I was a little kid, my grandpa was like big into WCW over WWF, and right around that time was when Disco Inferno was big. And so me and my friends, in the schoolyard, we would wrestle and stuff, right? Like, during recess, and we would like choose different characters. And for whatever reason, I was always Disco Inferno. So I would do the little disco dance and disco fever, disco. And
so you were tagging with Alex Wright at some point.
I was literally just about to bring up Alex Wright. I was literally just about to name drop him.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's lost all his hair, but he's still in phenomenal shape.
Well,
nowadays.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, man was a fucking, silver bullet.
Well, I know, but he used to have the gorgeous hair.
Oh,
that he was
yeah.
all about. So,
yes.
Yeah. But yes, no, disco. So I have a bit of a soft spot in my heart for Disco Inferno just because of that. So like I remember him, and I always thought the guy could have been way bigger than he was. He was just like a mid card that always had potential. He was good on the mic.
Like an annoying mouth breathing son of a bitch, but.
Well, that's why I played him, right? I just write him out.
Could say, I'm with you. I'm over here with
my people.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm sporting Nash, the acerbic asshole that everybody can't stand, blowhard jackass. His greatest aspiration was to work in a strip club. So
yeah, but I listen to and Disco's there. I listen to Click This. I touch base with the Flair stuff, and then sometimes I'll like check in with like the Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett stuff.
Yeah.
All
Bischoff
the old-timers.
he's a little entertaining from time to time, but yeah, he's another one of those.
Well, he's got really good knowledge on the business and stuff too, and he just has such a varied experience there with his runs, with all three major ones, right? TNA.
Yeah, there's a degree to which the self-aggrandizing becomes tedious, and I think that's where a lot of it kind of beats me out. But that's also why, like, the 605 is fun because it's. With Last, at least it feels like a put on, but who knows? So now that we have completely alienated about the other 80% of the listeners that are here, other than Michael,
in another 40%.
Here's hoping if we can expand into that wrestling market. It's very lucrative, as evidenced by Conrad Thompson.
That's right. And if you are in debt, we can
fuck off. No, have you heard about the sorry, I thought I was getting out, and then it pulled me back in.
He gets pulled. Oh no!
Have you heard about like the heat between Conrad and Brian Last? Have you encountered any of this?
No, I haven't. What?
There's a whole segment on the 605 where Brian Last like completely torpedoes Conrad and calls him a criminal, basically, and just says
surprised.
Like, shut the fuck up, stay in your lane, and stop trying to get over here into my business. It's exquisite. He calls him the bulbous and ballless one. He's like, you don't sound like a nasal castrati by choice, ladies and gentlemen. Like that man. Listen, it's great.
You know what? I'm not at all a fan of Conrad's, but that guy's got to be doing something right. Because if you look at him and then you look at his wife, you're like, how?
Oh, he's a salesman, as he says.
Well, exactly.
To, steal his phrase.
Yeah, you look at Flair's daughter there, and she's gorgeous, and you're married to this guy. And I mean, listen, I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm not the best looking guy in the world either or anything. But nevertheless, you see the two of them together, and you're like, and then you hear his voice, and you're like, she wakes up to that mess and has to listen to that over the dinner table. table.
Someone
and
who
I'm
looks like the bastard son of Akeem the African Dream. Yeah,
and
obviously.
I'm like, okay, this guy
something's
must
crazy
be
here.
doing something right. Like he must be making bank off these advertisements or something. And she can't even be poor. Flair's got to be pretty well off. So
oh
it
no,
can't be
he's
the
been
money.
poor for quite some time.
Well, yeah, that's true. All the divorce and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and excessive lifestyle.
But now
There's
he's got the Ric
documentaries
Flair
about
drip
this.
that
Go
he's
on.
just making,
Oh my God! Yeah, the Ric Flair drip needs to be cured with penicillin. Anyway, I think we're back to that whole Michael gets to cut this into 2 parts so that you don't just kill people. But
I've been thinking about that for the last
sure
30
you have.
minutes.
Well, I will try to give you outros that work for either. But in case you are wrestling with your conscience about whether or not we are going to strangle the life out of this show before it taps out, we are actually the hand was raised on the 3rd, but we're hulking our way back up here, ladies and gentlemen. The Disinformed podcast is not dead yet. Depending on how bad my cholesterol gets over the course of the next few months, we'll see. But
the heartbreak kid coming in.
Yeah, if only. Consider this the Janetti through the barbershop window all over again. Oh, what a rush. So, ladies and germaphobes, we always appreciate you being here with us. It is a delight every single installment, regardless of what I may or may not say on the subject. And again, thank you all for being here for nearly 200 episodes, which still just stymies me. That's a significant amount of time under the bridge.
I don't even want to think about that.
Oh, do think about it, though, because that's we've lasted longer than 80% of the podcasts that get started, so give a little credit where it's due. Largely due to your tenacity, my friend, so thank you for that.
I will not die.
Yes.
I refuse.
Hats off, sir. Hats off.
There's a song title there somewhere, but we're not going to touch that. So in any event, of course, we do have socials that are dying a grisly death, unlike the show. I'm not sure the Instagram will ever nip up, but on the off chance that it does spring up like Sean and have another run at The Undertaker before they get thrown back into the ground, you can check us out. There's a link tree in the show notes below where you can go and see all of our exploits, including Michael's extensive efforts to keep us live, virile, and important over on the Tubes of You, with my most recent run of me talking about my thorough knowledge of the Spice Girls, and not in the ways you'd expect, has been really delightful, so thank you for that. But so you can find us anywhere disreputable assholes are sold, I guarantee it. And so find us there, give us a little love, like, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear from you. Michael craves engagement, so give him the sweet sucker that he so craves.
I'm so hungry.
And thirsty as well, guaranteed.
I mean,
he's out there in the desert.
He is. And almost as thirsty as the doctor over here, trying to tempt folks into his lovely home.
Listen, I'm literally falling out my chair trying to get you guys coming in.
He is.
It is known.
We've got honey pots in so many different ways here,
Come into my backyard.
It's the backyard taco all over again.
Oh no! Oh, no.
All right. Well, I think that is going to officially wrap this thing up like a corpse being dragged into Michael's backyard.
Or crawl space. We're all inclusive with where he stores his corpses.
What are you, Gacy? Fuck.
Just come visit me in Hampton, Virginia.
Fucking Pennywise, the co-host here. Pennywise, the podcaster. For the Disinformed podcast this week, I'm Shane.
And I'm Michael.
I'm Michael. And zippity zoop, we're out of here.